Okay, I think we are ready to get started again. Welcome to this week's office hours for ESG and ESGCV. My name is Kimberly Simpson and I am today's moderator. If you are just joining us, please go to the chat and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent. As a reminder, this office hours session is being recorded for public record. Office hours recordings are on the California ESGCV past trainings webpage. A copy of the slide deck and recording will also be emailed to you. Next slide, please. How to ask a question. All questions must be submitted in the chat box. Please type your organization and question into the chat box. The team will read questions out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers if possible throughout the presentation. All questions and answers entered in the chat box will be recorded as part of the public record. Alongside our presenters, we also have several HCD staff, including ESG representatives, ESG CV grant administrators, and other consultants who are able to answer questions during the Q&A session. Next slide, please. Today's office hours session agenda includes ESG resources and ESG CV updates, office hour updates, upcoming trainings, ESG and ESG CV Q&A, and our Spotlight Series presentation, ESG CV Closeout and Disposition of ESG CV Equipment. Next slide, please. And now I'll pass it to Connie and Tuesday for ESG updates.
Thanks, Kimberly. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to let everybody know that we will be issuing a one-time special homelessness prevention NOFA in September. Now, the funding for this NOFA is from our disencumbered 2020 funds. We have $1.7 million that we can fund homelessness prevention contracts with. Again, the only activity that will be allowed under this NOFA will be homelessness prevention. It'll be over the counter, which means first in, first reviewed. All applicants must have approved homelessness prevention policies and procedures. And we do have a few jurisdictions that already have approved HP policies and procedures. If you're interested in applying and coming in for this funding and you don't have approved HP policies and procedures, if you want to go ahead and start writing those and you can attach them to the application, or you can have us look at those prior to the September NOFA. They do have to be approved, but you can submit those with the application in September. So we will do a quick turnaround for review and hopefully an approval of those. Again, it's over the counter, so first in, first reviewed until all funds are exhausted. And funds under this NOFA will expire on September 7th of 2024. Next slide, please. So we want to hear from you. I just want to let us know, is there a need in your community for this type of funding? And then how many of you would be interested in applying? And we've already heard from a few jurisdictions, which is great. You can submit your questions to the ESG NOFA inbox. You can always reach out to me. Again, if you're not sure about the homelessness prevention policies and procedures, we do have our homelessness prevention policy manual and document on our ESG webpage, and also a checklist to help you work through those policies and procedures. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Tuesday that I can answer? All right, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Tuesday.
Thanks, Connie. Hi, good morning. The 2022 contracts are routing, and the 2023 NOFA will hopefully be released in August, early August. A webinar will follow right after that. So we wanted to remind you that the annual ESG expenditure deadline is August 31st. That's only a month, like a little over a month and a half away. You need to get that spending done and get your request for funds in. Next slide, please. Here is our ESG HCV website resource page. There's a lot of great resources here. This is where you'll find HP manual and checklist if you wanted to apply for that special NOFA. Next slide, please. And here's your ESG team. There's Diane Prado, Giovanni Martinez, Anthony Cepeda, and me, Tuesday Fool. Sarah Theobald is our program manager. And if you need to ask us any questions, you can reach us directly as your representatives, or you can reach out to the NOFA mailbox, which is esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Connie and Tuesday. Now I just have some ESG CV updates and reminders. Reminders for performance milestones. All program funds for projects, street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention must be expended by September 30th, 2023. All funds for HMIS and administrative costs shall be expended by October 31st, 2023. And financial requests for funds must be submitted to the department by November 15th, 2023. Next slide, please. Reminders while planning for ESG CV closeout. Spend down timing. Know when you're approaching the end. Know the most funds are due to be spent by September 30th, 2023. So don't spend too fast, but make the time it right. Funding continuity. Consider HAP funding and other funding streams that will allow you to continue to serve clients after closeout. Closing intake. Set dates and deadlines to stop accepting client intake and prepare for final rapid rehousing assistance. Staffing issues. Just like we need to make sure we are all not leaving participants with nowhere to go, we also need to make sure we are thinking of ways to keep staff employed. Client issues. Make sure you involve and inform participants timely before assistance ends so they can prepare as well. No client should become homeless because a program is closing. Next slide, please. HCD upcoming office hour topics. July 19th, HUD Exchange and AQQ. July 26th, financial record keeping. And August the 12th, ESG guidelines listening session. Next slide, please. New HCD office hour training session. There is a new link for office hours. That link will be put into the chat for you to be able to register. It will also be included in the slide deck. Next slide, please. Upcoming trainings for July 31st. From 11 to 12:30, we have the coordinated street outreach and encampment best practices, and it is a community workshop training. Next slide, please. At this time, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat, and you may continue to put your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. And let me see if there are any questions.
No questions right now, Kim.
Okay. Thank you. Next slide, please. To contact us, if you need to contact your annual ESG rep, you can reach out to your ESG representative or esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov. For ESG CV, please reach out to your grant administrator. Next slide, please. And now let's turn our attention to today's Spotlight series, ESG CV Closeout and Disposition of ESG CV Equipment with LaQuantia Goodman and Chris Andrews.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. My name is LaQuantia Goodman. I will be presenting today along with Mr. Chris Andrews. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Great to see you all. Happy to be talking about Closeout. It's hard to believe that we're here talking about Closeout, but where we are in the program.
Already, it has gone by so quickly. Next slide, please. So for our ESG CV closeout process, for rounds 1 and round 2, all project costs must be expended by September 30th, 2023. The drawdown deadline for those funds is April 30th, 2024. And the QPR deadline is July 31st, 2024. Rounds 1 and 2 of HMIS and admin funds needed for closeout. The expenditure deadline is December 31st, 2023. And the drawdown deadline is April 30th, 2024. And again, that QPR deadline is July 31st, 2024. All reallocated funds that have been received must be expended by June 30th, 2024. And the drawdown deadline for those funds is October 31st, 2024. And the QPR deadline is January 31st, 2025. Next slide. As part of the ESG CV closeout process, subrecipients must submit a final request for funds or a final RFF and an HMIS data quality reports by budget component. HCD will not process the final RFF until the complete HMIS data quality reports by budget component has been received. So please remember that you must submit those reports, those HMIS data reports before your final RFF can be processed. Subrecipients will need to submit the HMIS Sage Bundle beneficiaries reports through the quarter ending on December 31st, 2023. Subrecipients that received additional funds will need to submit these bundles through the quarter ending on June 30th, 2024. Subrecipients will need to complete an ESG CV certificate of completion form after the final RFF is completed. Your grant administrator will provide you with this form. If funds remain, do not round off the amount of funds remaining on the completion form. Next slide. Chris, I'll pass it to you.
Great. Thank you. We're just going to talk a little bit about equipment use and disposition. I'm wondering if before we do, just I love kind of using the reactions and go ahead and raise your hand or give a thumbs up if your program has made any kind of big ticket purchases. If you bought a mobile shower, if you bought a vehicle, any equipment that you might have acquired or purchased over the value of $5,000, go ahead and raise your hand if you fall into that boat. Seen a couple hands pop up. So I think one, if you aren't sure if you fall into that bucket, or if you're not sure kind of what you've acquired, right? The beginning of ESG CV was a really busy time. Do a double check of your program. I think you always want to know, do you have equipment that you should be thinking about disposition, and being able to start thinking about that now when we're still a few months out from closeout is helpful. Within the definition of 2 CFR 200, when we're talking about equipment, we're talking about something, an item that you purchased, an item that you acquired that has a value of more than $5,000. What we most often see that being within the ESG or ESG CV program, vehicles, mobile shower, mobile laundry, mobile bathroom facilities, other items being used for outreach, large scale equipment that might be used in a shelter, be it a generator, being it HVAC equipment, depending on how that's structured. but any of those would fall under the definition of being equipment and something that would be falling under the disposition policy. Next slide. And so within the policy for equipment use and disposition, the intent is that the primary intent, or the initial intent, is that any equipment that has been acquired with ESG or ESG CV funding is that equipment will continue to be used for the activity that it was initially acquired for. Regardless if that activity is going to be continued to be funded by ESG, if it's going to be moving under a different program, be it state, be it local, be it other federal money. The ideal intent is that equipment will continue to be used to support that initial activity. The purchasing entity, and this is important, and I think kind of when we talk about equipment use, and LaQuantia is going to talk about this in a little bit more in a second, if you have questions on equipment and disposition, bring those up with your grant administrator, bring them up to HCD, and make sure that you're operating under sound advice. You don't want to make a decision with your equipment that you then need to reconcile, and that can be hard to do if you're selling equipment and not doing it in the correct fashion. So if you do have questions, go to HCD first, and we can make sure to support you all kind of in a one-on-one understanding your unique scenario. But it's important to note the purchasing entity cannot encumber the equipment without prior approval of HCD. Next slide.
Equipment disposition. When no longer needed for the original project or program, equipment must be disposed of in the following order of priority. 1, activities under another HUD award. 2, activities under another federal award. Or 3, all other cases. Next slide. Equipment disposition for activities under another HUD award. Equipment may be used in other activities supported by another award from HUD. Initial priority shall be given to other activities supporting people experiencing homelessness or homeless response systems. Next slide.
And then that equipment can also be disposed to support activities under other federal awards. With a priority of other awards supporting people experiencing homelessness, supporting homeless response systems, supporting housing for low-income households, and then more generally, activities promoting community development, social community services, and then any other federally funded activity being the priority order of that disposition. Next slide. And then finally, if that isn't a feasible disposition option, right, of being able to continue its use under the same activity, being able to consider disposition to another HUD-funded activity or another federal award, at that point, you are generally selling the equipment. And this is where you are needing to get disposition instructions from HUD, making sure that HCD is included in that dialogue, that they're understanding what those disposition instructions and processes are. And you need to operate in accordance with those instructions. Generally, if the fair market value of that equipment, of that item, is less than $5,000, that equipment can be retained, sold, otherwise disposed of with no reporting, no other requirements to HUD or to HCD. If that value is above that $5,000, you are selling that item, and then you are generally kind of returning to HUD through HCD the proportional value of that project or of that sale from what the proportional value of HUD funding was into that original project. Again, this would be in the instructions. Generally, you may be able to deduct $500 or 10% of the proceeds, whichever is less, for the cost of selling and handling those expenses, right? For the administrative burden of having to sell that vehicle, sell that mobile shower unit, whatever it may be. You're able to retain that $500 or 10%. And then you may consider, in consultation with HUD, in lieu of selling it, transferring title of that property to the federal government or to an identified eligible third party that would continue to use that. I think the important thing here, again, sound a little bit like a broken record, if you are disposing of something, seek advice early, seek advice often. Make sure that you're operating under the instructions of HCD, make sure you're operating under the instructions of HUD, and keep everybody in the loop on what those instructions are to follow the disposition requirements. Within the ESG, CV world, we generally don't dispose of a lot of items, dispose of a lot of equipment. So it's a little bit of a new frontier for all of us who have been operating that equipment disposition. So I would just encourage all of you, if you are in that position, to make sure that you are, getting specific guidance, based on the item that you are needing to dispose of, and do that through your grant administrator. And with that, want to open it up for any questions on closeout process, making sure that all of your financial information, all of your beneficiary information is cleaned up and accurately reported, or any questions that you all may have on equipment or disposition.
And I know for the last several weeks, we have been lightly touching on, the closeout process and including those necessary dates in our presentations. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions that you may have so that you can be clear about exactly what you can and cannot do or what you should expect.
Eleanor, great question, right? So if you don't have other federal grants, but are planning to continue to fund your activity, let's call it a street outreach program, and you're using a vehicle for that, if to the very, I think, first slide that Laquantia talked to, right, is the primary goal of your equipment at disposition is that you're continuing to use that activity or use that equipment to carry out the same activity. I think you would want to document and you'd want to consult with your grant administrator on, on what that intent is, showing that you are going to continue to be using that vehicle for the same purpose and follow their guidance. But I think generally that falls in line with HCD's intent in terms of their equipment and disposition policy.
Eleanor, what agency are you with? Just asking so that we can make sure we follow up with you about the disposition. Okay, Imperial County, thank you. Who else has a question? And remember, during this process, it's kind of like the no question is a dumb question thing, because you're wondering something that someone else is wondering, I'm sure. So please do ask that question so that we all can be clear on what it is that you need or you have questions about.
Wanted to add a piece to the, right, if the equipment is valued at less than $5,000, which depending on what you have, you might be having things that are now being valued at fair market value of less than that, is you want to make sure that you're documenting that value and not just assuming of saying, okay, well, this equipment X is now not worth more than $5,000, so I'm in the clear. I don't have to follow a disposition requirement. Document. How did you come to that determination? How did you realize that that piece of equipment is no longer more than $5,000?
Don't see anyone else with their hand raised. Does anyone want to come off mute and ask their question? Amanda from Orange County, we have a question on another topic. When completing the match worksheet of the APR workbook, are we able to change match source from what was originally reported on the quarterly RFFs? I think that's an ESG question. Is Sarah or Tuesday or Connie still here?
Yes. So could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Amanda's asking, when completing the match worksheet of the APR workbook 2, are we able to change the match source from what was originally reported on the quarterly RFFs?
So I'm going to have you send that question into the ESG NOFA box. So Sarah can respond to you. She's leading the charge in that APR project. That'd be the best thing. If you send it to ESG NOFA inbox with your questions, Sarah will get right back to you.
Thank you, Connie. Well, we're not seeing any more questions or any more hands raised or anyone coming off mute. Kim, would you like to close us out?
Thank you all for your questions. As usual, a quick survey will launch as you exit this session. Please take a minute to reply, as we are always striving to provide useful content and needed technical assistance and training. Have a great day, everyone.